Under a cloudless August sky, the cannons of the new warship Vasa glinted in the sun. The harbor at Stockholm was alive with cheers, flags snapping, and the creak of ropes as hundreds crowded the waterfront. Families packed the quayside, merchants leaned from windows, and soldiers lined the decks of nearby vessels. The king's warship, painted in rich red and blue and draped in carved sculptures, stood like a floating fortress. She was meant to be a statement of power. Her sails caught the first stiff breath of wind, and the ship began to move, proud and heavy, sliding out into the channel. The moment was meant to mark a new chapter in Sweden's dominance at sea. Within minutes, it turned into a nightmare. The Vasa heeled suddenly to one side as she cleared the shelter of the harbor wall. The spectators shouted in alarm as the ship righted herself, sails straining, water spraying across the deck. On board, men scrambled to brace guns and ropes. Mothers in the crowd clutched children close. Then, as the second gust hit, the ship heeled again. This time she did not recover. The lower gun ports, left open for display, dipped beneath the surface. A torrent of water surged in, flooding the gun deck, drenching powder, and dragging the ship further under. In full view of the king's city, the pride of the fleet rolled helplessly, timbers groaning, masts tilting. Men leapt into the water, some weighed down by armor, others clutching splintered wood. Within minutes, the great ship vanished beneath the waves, her masts jutting like broken bones above the surface. The crowd stood in stunned silence. A ship meant to carry 64 bronze cannons, a war machine meant to terrify enemies abroad, had sunk less than a mile from her berth. Dozens drowned. Survivors swam ashore, shaking with shock. The king himself, Gustavus Adolphus, was away on campaign in Poland, but news traveled fast. His grand project, built to secure Sweden's claim to naval supremacy, had gone down on its very first voyage. It was 1628, and the disaster struck not on some foreign sea, but in the safety of Stockholm's own harbor. The Vasa had been ordered in haste. Sweden was at war, locked in struggle with Poland, and striving to dominate the Baltic. The king demanded a warship larger and more heavily armed than any that had come before. His instructions pressed the builders to go higher, to carry 2 full decks of heavy cannon. The design stretched limits no shipwright had tested under Swedish waters. Construction began in 1626 under master builder Henrik Hubertson, a Dutchman whose experience with warships was well respected. But Hubertson fell ill during the project and died before the ship was finished, leaving his assistants and Swedish overseers to interpret his plans and satisfy the king's impatient demands. By the summer of 1628, the hull stood complete, carved with ornate statues and painted in brilliant color. It was meant not only as a weapon but as a floating monument to Sweden's power. Crews loaded cannons, provisions, and ballast, but the balance was never properly tested. A stability trial was attempted. 30 men ran back and forth across the deck as officers watched the ship's roll. After only 3 passes, the test was stopped. The ship heeled dangerously even under that small strain. Those who witnessed it knew she was unstable, but no one dared halt the launch. Orders from the crown outweighed concerns whispered on the dock. The ship must sail. Honor, money, and royal expectation demanded it. On August 10th, the Vasa was prepared for her maiden voyage, her decks filled with sailors, gunners, and families invited to watch the departure. Flags snapped above, the sculptures of lions and warriors glaring down from the stern. Cannon ports were opened to show the ship fully armed, a gesture of intimidation meant to impress the crowd and send a message abroad. Lines were cast off, drums rolled, the sails caught the wind. For a brief moment, the ship appeared every bit the symbol her builders had promised. Then, the gusts rolled in from the south. The ship leaned hard. Voices rose in alarm, some shouted to close the ports, others to shift ballast, but the Vasa was too tall, too narrow, too top-heavy. She heeled, and then, before anyone could correct her, the sea rushed inside. Once the lower gun ports were submerged, the ship's fate was sealed. Water poured across the gun deck, and the Vasa began her death throes. Panic broke out. Survivors later recalled the chaos: men fighting to climb rigging, families hurling themselves into the water, sailors dragged down by gear and weapons. Around 50 lives were lost. In less than 20 minutes, the grand warship lay on the seabed, only her tallest masts breaking the surface. The city reeled. How could such a costly project fail so completely? Rumors spread through Stockholm that God had judged the pride of the king, that corrupt builders had cheated the crown, that enemies had cursed the ship. Officials launched inquiries, and carpenters, sailors, and officers were summoned to testify. Records show that many spoke cautiously, unwilling to blame the king's design or the pressures of his demands. No one wanted to place responsibility where it truly lay. The verdict was diplomatic. The disaster had no single cause, only the will of God. In truth, the Vasa's instability was well known, her faults clear even before she left the dock. But no one could oppose the crown. In the weeks that followed, attempts were made to salvage the cannons. Divers, working with primitive suits and weighted ropes, managed to recover some of the bronze guns, but the ship herself remained lodged in the mud. Over time, she was forgotten, her fate remembered mostly as a cautionary tale about haste, pride, and the dangers of ignoring warning signs. For centuries, the wreck lay preserved in the cold, brackish waters of Stockholm harbor, untouched by time, her wood protected from rot by the Baltic's unique conditions. It would not be until the mid-20th century that the Vasa returned to the surface. In 1961, a massive salvage effort raised the ship almost intact, waterlogged but astonishingly preserved after more than 300 years. The recovery revealed not only the majesty of the original build, the carvings, the towering stern, but also the flaws that doomed her. Ballast stones still lay in place, far too light for a ship with such high sides and heavy guns. The gun decks told the same story survivors once had: a ship armed for war but too unstable to sail. Today, the Vasa stands in her own museum in Stockholm, one of the best-preserved 17th-century warships in the world. She is a relic of ambition, an artifact of naval warfare, and a reminder of the price paid when pride overrides caution. Visitors walk her decks and see the same carvings the crowds once cheered in 1628. They see the scars of water and the weight of failure. What was meant to be a symbol of triumph became instead one of Sweden's most enduring tragedies. The loss of the Vasa remains a story not of storm or enemy action, but of human decision, of haste, pressure, and silence in the face of power. In the bright August sun, with drums rolling and banners high, the great ship tipped into eternity before it ever had the chance to prove itself at sea. Thank you for listening to the Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.